Welcome to the first in a series of 4 podcasts, and welcome to the beautiful city of Tartu in Estonia. My name is Mark Thomas. I'm going to be guiding our guests through the theme of our changing workplaces and what we need for remote working. These podcasts are part of the URBACT project under the banner of Remote IT. URBACT, an EU programme for sustainable urban development, offers European cities a platform for learning and sharing experiences to enhance their ability to develop and implement innovative urban solutions. By forming networks on specific urban challenges, URBACT promotes cooperation and idea exchange among partner cities. It builds local stakeholder skills in designing and executing integrated policies and disseminates knowledge and best practices. The Remote IT Network, part of the URBACT programme, focuses on the future of work, particularly the impact of hybrid and remote work on sustainable urban development. Studies show that on a global level, around 16% of companies are fully remote, and as of 2022, 10.2% of employed people in the European Union worked from home. Of course, one main driving factor in recent years was the global pandemic. However, this appears to have been a spark to light the flame. This is the first of 4 Remote IT podcasts that will cover the course of the project and explore the digital transformation of our workplace. So, how has our workplace changed? The traditional 9 to 5 in a fixed office is becoming more and more rare. But what are the challenges for remote workers? Just how easy is it to work from home or indeed travel? And are we prepared for the development of remote working? Joining me today to discuss these topics and more are firstly Sirja Sulakatko.
Hello.
Hello. From Estonia, and she is the CEO of Smartwork Association. This is a non-profit association that has been operating for more than 15 years, and its main mission is to inspire and support organizations and leaders to apply flexible ways of working. Welcome, Sirja.
Welcome.
Thank you. And from Romania, we have Alex.
Hi, Alex Dincovici.
Hi, Alex. He is Executive Director of the Romanian Businessmen Association, and along with his wife Alexandru, they own the market research and consulting company IziBiz Consulting. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you. Great to be here.
He has also been for a little more than 2 years a part of the team of Innovex, who is currently rated as one of Europe's leading startup hubs. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And last but not least, we have Salvatore Modeo from Italy. Salvatore is the founder of the Qube.
Yes,
Did I
correct.
pronounce that correctly? A Certified Business Incubator specializing in development and innovation for startups and companies. He has been involved in over 60 projects as a project manager, coordinator, and trainer. He is a consultant and advisor for numerous high-tech startups. Welcome, Salvatore.
Thank you so much.
So, question number 1. And of course, ladies first, Sirja. So just how did the global pandemic change the face of our workplace?
Well, it was, of course, seen, as also you mentioned, that many organizations today, after the global pandemic, started to apply remote working practices. And it definitely boosted the number of organizations that hadn't been working remotely before. But also it was seen that it increased the level and the scope and the depth of using remote working in those organizations who had already been practicing it. So all in all, there was, of course, a increase in those organizations. But what we also have witnessed in Smartwork Association in Estonia is that many organizations also, and people and leaders, burned their fingers. Really? If they didn't have the, let's say, preparation done before, then they had actually quite bad experience. And of course, some of the negative impacts of the COVID pandemic, such as kindergarten being closed, schools being closed, kids running around, hard to focus, etc. So people started to blame it on remote work. But actually, that was not the fault of the remote work, but that was just a pandemic. And also, before pandemic, remote work was kind of a choice that the person could make. You know, either you work from home or you work from the office. However, pandemic forced people to work from home, and that flexibility was taken away. So again, people felt that, maybe they didn't like it that way. So today what we see, and what you've also mentioned, is that many organizations still provide flexible ways of working. There's a significant rise in employees who wish to work flexibly, but there are also quite many organizations who are struggling because they don't know how to proceed from here.
Yeah, so sorry, just to follow up. So you said there's an increasing number of employees who want to work remotely, but are the number of employers following that need from the employees? Do you understand what I mean?
Yes, I would say that most of the employers do. And today at the, let's say, job interview, the question is not so much anymore on is the organization applying remote working practices, at least here in Estonia, but rather to what extent they are providing it. However, there are, of course, as I mentioned, those organizations who burned their fingers, and those were also those who had just started during pandemic. They didn't have the infrastructure at place. They hadn't prepared their leaders. They had problems with coordinating, creating, let's say, shared understandings within this framework. And they kind of started to pull back the people to the offices. But also those organizations who were prepared and did kind of a very big leap from applying remote work to some extent to kind of applying it a lot. They are also struggling now because people have a lot of opportunities when they're working remotely. They can work in several projects. They can take even in different organizations at the same time. Before that, it was really hard. You couldn't be at two offices at the same place at the same time. But now you can basically switch between different organizations. So what we see is that those organizations who have been using remote work quite extensively are also struggling to have that employee engagement. So they don't know how to get their people back to focus on their projects. And what they're doing oftentimes, sadly, is that they're also starting to kind of force being in the office again, while actually what we suggest to do is to change the way how you lead, and rather than measuring employee satisfaction, to start really measuring employee engagement and kind of to start working on increasing that engagement. That involves job design, kind of agreeing together with the employee what would be the next steps, what would be the next goals, how to get there. It involves a lot of things, but it basically is all drawn back to how you lead.
Yes, thank you. Salvatore, do you think that the whole pandemic basically just sped up something that was inevitable, that was only going to happen anyway?
Yes, my point of view is a little bit different. We manage a co-working space, one in the city of Lecce from 2016 and the one in Brindisi from 2020. And our point of view is different because before pandemic crisis, the company live inside the co-working space. Some company after pandemic doesn't come back. So they just continuously with the remote working. But at the same time, we open a new kind of customer segment. And there are a lot of people from Apulia region that works abroad that come back in the region and start to work remotely. So it's a start for us a new customer segment, and we start to work with these people, and are people that are manager in different companies and just live here in Apulia and live with their family. And this is completely change our business model.
Interesting.
And our co-working communities.
Interesting. Alex, what did you learn from the experience? How did the pandemic affect your business and indeed the whole atmosphere of the workforce in Romania?
Well, in Romania, it was a bit different because we weren't as digitalized as Estonia, for instance. And before the pandemic, I think only less than 1% of Romanian workers would work remotely, which is
1%.
Less than 1%. I think the percentage was 0.8%, to be more precise.
Oh.
Yes, and this meant we also didn't have specific legislation that encouraged it, and most companies were just forced to send their people home and were somehow forced to try and design a new workforce and workflows and software and everything in order to keep the business going, which was extremely difficult. Like you said before, for Estonia, a lot of them didn't do it well. So after the pandemic, many people came back to the office. Now I think in 2022, the percentage stabilized around 20% remote working, which is obviously 20 times higher than before.
That's quite a jump. That's quite a jump.
Yes, but still, it's something that obviously doesn't work for anyone. I think it's at least a middle class or even higher perk for people, because you can be on a minimum wage, for instance, and be a happy remote worker. This just doesn't work because you don't even have the resources in order to be comfortable working from home. And this was one of the points, the teachings from the pandemic, I think, when schools were closed and even children were forced to learn from home. It was really difficult to be in a two-bedroom apartment, for instance, and have two adults and two kids that was in the best case scenario, trying to have different workspaces and doing jobs. And well, where parents weren't able to go and work from home, it was even harder because children were supposed to be homeschooled somehow remotely without an adult supervising them in many cases, and this was pretty tricky. But also remote work in Romania right now is more of a, let's say, hybrid form, in which most companies have 1 or 2 days per month, sometimes per week, which are usually fixed, but some have let their people choose in which days to come, in which they have to go to the office, and the other days they can just work from home. But you have legislation that constrains it, because there's employer liability for what happens to the employer while he's at work. So for remote working, especially in Romania, this was an issue because in the legislation, you're supposed to let your employer know, for instance, which way you're going home. I mean, what transportation you're using, what's the road. Because if something happens on the way to work or on the way home back from work, the employer is liable.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So coming from home in the morning, and I'm coming to work by bus.
Yes, you have an accident.
As soon as I leave my house, my employer is liable until I...
Yes. There is a liability, yes. You have work security, for instance, in which you're supposed to declare your trajectory. Also, there's legislation tries to stipulate how the employer can verify you're actually at home working, and this doesn't really allow you to be very, very flexible in most instances.
You're telling me this seems... So what if I say, today I'm going to walk, but then it starts to rain and I get on a bus? I've lied to my employer?
Yes, yeah, in theory, yes. So legislation, and I think not just in Romania, I think there are many countries where remote working actually is like this. Yes,
Estonia.
I would like to say, but then remote work and working from home is even better, because then the employer is not going anywhere.
Yes,
yes, you're right.
Exactly.
You're right, but you need to be home. So you have work policies in which you are able to work from anywhere, for instance, 1 month during the year. Okay. This usually happens with corporations who have somehow managed to establish processes that are, let's say, better suited for remote or hybrid work. For smaller companies, 2 things happened during the pandemic. Some of them disappeared because they couldn't handle the transition, and some of them went digital and never went back, which was mostly a good thing. But it was really hard for, let's say, old-style Romanian bosses that were really supposed to look at their employees every day in the eye and just tell them what to do and everything else. And
so you have a cultural
yes,
question.
We also have this for older, let's say, small and medium enterprises. This was a management issue, a management and a leadership, yes. But some of them adapted and are doing really great.
Interesting. Salvatore, how has remote work impacted productivity, and just as importantly, we're talking about a little bit this now, the work-life balance?
Okay, my experience is that improved the work-life balance, and a lot of people can work close to their family. And one of the effects that we saw is that in many big cities like Milan or Rome, if you need to move from home to your work office, you need 1 hour or more by train or by public transportation.
Yes.
And with the remote work, you can save 1 hour of your life each day.
Or 2 hours. If you have an hour there,
or 2 hours.
an hour back, yes, it's 2 hours.
So the impact is that you live more. You have 1 hour of life in more every day of your activities. So this is an important effect. I saw also, and I support also a startup during the pandemic period. It's just public transportation, and they start also to redesign the transportation in order to help the people to work also on the bus. So
Really?
yes, in that case, it's possible also for people to consider that hour of transport an hour of work. So this is some kind of effect.
I have a question. I have an obvious question. Okay, you're traveling for an hour on a bus.
Yeah.
Let's say you're contracted to work 8 hours of the day. Does that hour that you're going to work and hour that you're coming back mean that you're in the office for 6 hours? Or are you now working 10 hours?
No, 8 hours. But you start to consider when you join the bus.
So that's when your work time starts.
And the bus is
cool.
start to become a kind of welfare services. So the company take the bus as a welfare services for their employee, and people can start to work when he's on the bus.
That's cool. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Do you have any experiences like that working on a bus?
I think that here in the Baltics, most of the buses have Wi-Fi and or you have such good mobile internet that you just work on your mobile. But I don't know that in Estonia, any company would kind of consider that time as part of your work time, unless you work in a factory. Probably.
No, I've never heard that before.
But when you work in the office, then usually your work time starts when you arrive to work. But Estonia is also relatively small, and our cities are much smaller, so it doesn't take that much time to get to work. But I just wanted to comment on the work-life balance, that one of the things that we have witnessed, and also it has been reported in academic studies, is that leaders, remote work or team leaders usually are afraid that people will work less.
Yes.
However, it usually has the complete opposite effect, meaning that people start working more, the boundaries between rest time and work time get more fuzzy, and there's a lot of burnout. And as I also said, it creates an opportunity to take additional projects and so forth. So it really has a risk that people eventually will burn out. And I think that some countries, also France, is moving to the direction of this disconnect legislation, that you have to be disconnected to a certain amount of time during the work week. I'm not really a big fan of these kind of measures. What I really believe into is that we really just need to increase the competencies of individuals to take care of their own health, their mental health,
Yes.
their physical health. But it creates a much higher managerial burden to people, because before they were kind of going to their work. If people started working, they started too. If people stood up, went home, they were like, okay, why am I sitting here? I will go home as well. But now you really have to be the one that at home that motivates yourself to start working. You have to be the one to tell yourself, okay, let's stop working and go to the gym or something like that. So it's much higher managerial burden. So I think that has to be also compensated. And that's
agree.
really hard, because in many organizations, in many countries, many organizations are just on the survival mode. They don't have the opportunity to compensate that type of managerial, let's say, kind of a new task or workload or responsibility that people have. So yes, it is difficult, and considering the comment on where to work and whether you have the tools and kind of the let's say setting for working at home, what Estonian organizations, not all, but many are doing, they are supporting people in this. They are supporting in buying the chairs and tables and computers to people. But again, of course, it's not possible in all cases, because sometimes there just is not the budget to do that.
Yes, I agree. I think that lots of people, there was some, maybe when the pandemic started, people, we're working remotely, we're working from home. there was this kind of view that everyone's going to be lying on the couch watching TV all day. Of course, the complete opposite happened, and people ended up working to 12 hours a day because they felt guilty because they were working from home. And that kind of destroys this. Before it was easy, well, maybe not in Romania where you had this hour where you're worried about how you're going to get to work and your employees following you. But before it was easy. I mean, you go to work, you open your desk, you open your computer, you go home, it's all done. Yeah, that's your break. You have this break. But when you work from somewhere where you would normally eat lunch, play with your children and watch TV and go to bed, then that break is hard. And that work-life balance mix, it's mental health is extremely important. We've seen that over the last few years, but it's extremely important to us. So finding that break, and like you said, most people kind of went over. It wasn't even a fuzzy zone. They just went over. They went over the top. Yeah, and that's a problem. How do you find this in Romania?
Obviously, yes, but also it's part of my personal experience because I've been working from home since I think at least 2009.
Oh,
I'm a veteran.
You're one of the less than 1%. That means, yeah.
Yes, it was during my PhD, and I started having all sorts of writing gigs for companies in the United States and individuals and so on. So basically, most of my life I've worked from home.
Did you ever work in an office? That was going to be my next question.
Yes, I have,
did.
but but I've only managed to just hold on to be there for 6 months, I think, and that was
Basta, enough.
No, that was more than enough. I've spent more time with some companies, but mostly in hybrid settings where I would go to the office as much as I could, and then just take care and make sure that work was done. And I really like what you're saying, that individuals right now need to have managerial capabilities, but this is also it can be a feature of legislation or not, because talking about compensating them or not depends if companies are able to or if they are encouraged to. If I get back to Romania, for instance, you have some fiscal legislation for a few years ago that encourage people to go turn them into solopreneurs, let's say more of an entrepreneur. So you'd have less taxes if you were working with a contract with a company and just start an LLC, because you have really work tax in Romania, labor tax in Romania is about 43%, I think.
How much?
43%. So 43% of what the employer pays you. Yeah, it's quite a lot. So working independently, granted, some people allowed companies to make, let's say, pay people better with contracts, but it means you don't have a work contract anymore. You have a service contract. So in this case, you get to a compromise. The company pays you maybe less, you gain more money, but you don't have all the social benefits you would have with the work contracts. No security at all. And what also happens is you can't actually expect more from the company. So since you're managing your own contract and work, there's a huge burden placed on you, and you just find out that you're not just an entrepreneur. You need to manage a lot of things in your life. And this is where burnout really happens a lot of times. This is why I say legislation is very, very important, and fiscal incentives and how it's structured is very important, because you can have absurd things come into place at some point, because nobody thought it would be a side effect.
Yes, it would appear. So tell me, Alex, how do you foster a sense of belonging to a team and having this team cohesion in a remote work environment?
Well, it's really hard to do, and this is probably the thing that companies struggle the most with, because what matters most, in my opinion, is how induction happens and how you become part of the team when it's a remote team. And if you're only there for, let's say, work-based interactions, having the sense of connection and engagement might not happen. So you need some let's say, maybe time off with your colleagues, some non-formal interactions that would really help, and you need a much better structured induction process, which you can get away without it in a traditional company where you don't work remotely. But if you work online and the induction is not done properly, you'll lose people.
They'll just drift away.
Yes,
they'll not feel that they're part of a team or something like this.
They'll drift away. I constantly see discussions about people being new into teams, and teams complaining about them not performing well, people complaining they don't have a sense of direction, and this happens in face-to-face interaction because there's no induction process, because there's no one mentoring people and explaining them to new employees, this is your job, I mean, these are your colleagues, you can ask him this and that. And it's really tough if you don't have it. For instance, I work with some multinational companies with some leadership programs in which I'm trying to make even employees understand that if they have a complaint with someone, usually you have, for instance, in companies, you have like the transversal departments like IT, HR, and a lot of the departments that are not directly into production that nobody likes, because everything that comes on their behalf comes like an additional burden. This is something the HR does. This is something the IT guy does. Something doesn't work, I'm going to complain to you because you're the IT guy and I'm really upset that my connection isn't working. I'm going to just be very aggressive with you, but I start realizing that you're just a colleague. You also have limited resources. You have all the hate from the organization coming on your side if something technical doesn't work. And this is where the most severe issues happen if, let's say, you don't understand who does what, how you're supposed to approach your colleagues, what's the culture there, what's the climate. If you don't work on these conditions, on climate and culture, and if you don't have the induction process,
this is something that needs to be worked on, like the foundations, like day one, basically.
Yes.
There's no ad hoc to this. You can't make things up as you go along.
You can, but it's
much harder.
It's much harder.
Here's the ground rules. This is what we're going to do. Yeah. So people know where they are from the beginning. So you were talking about people coming back to your region from other parts of the world and basically remoting there. So do they have these, like, how do they, I'm going to ask you this question, how do they address the potential feelings of isolation or disengagement among remote team members? Because they've literally moved across different countries.
Yeah, we saw this in the co-working space. For us, the ideas of remote working is not alone in the apartment, is not alone in the hotel, is not alone. So the ideas of co-working space is also a place where I can meet other people and I can work on my company, but there are some kind of dynamics inside and are social dynamics that we need to have. And find this kind of place is the right place where you can work. It's not only a question of chair or desk, but it's a question of community, it's a question of people. And we see also a lot of people that just start to work and to visit the world, also jumping from one co-working space to another one.
Oh, really?
And they have this kind of experience, a new way to see the life, to work, and also to visit the world. So the ideas and the suggestion for the remote worker is don't do this alone in your apartment, but visit some kind of place.
1 second, sorry. This is a slightly different approach. So your opinion is that in a co-working space where everybody's doing different things, working for different companies, doing different jobs, that synergy or that energy that's in that room, in that co-working space, negates these feelings of isolation and basically makes them more productive.
We see a lot of people that just stay in their home, that come here in the co-working space because their feeling is I feel myself alone and I don't have the force or the ideas to work. I prefer to stay here because there are more noise, there are more people. I can talk with someone, I can take a coffee, I can have a break, and this is the social experience that we need to offer.
Yes, because they might just chat over a coffee, about the weather. It doesn't really matter, or the football, or who knows what.
The change, also the paradigm of co-working space is changing. So this is not only a desk, but it's a group of people. It's a community that you know, and especially if you are abroad or if you are in another country, you need to discover the world from different eyes. And the eyes is the eyes of the community.
Sorry, you were saying?
Yes, I just wanted to comment and say that I fully agree that these co-working spaces, or in general places where people can meet other people and be around with people, are extremely important. And I think that also explains why many people during COVID pandemic actually burned their fingers, because before COVID they were used to going to work in the cafeteria just to be around people or go to the co-working space. But suddenly, everything was closed and you just had to be at home. But I just also wanted to draw attention, that the need for socializing really depends a lot on the person and their kind of how they live. Because I have also worked remotely for 8 years, fully remotely, but I have 3 kids So my need for socializing is much lower than some of my colleagues who are living alone or just with a spouse. And I also experienced that during COVID pandemic, that, when I had that 1 hour slot when I had just put the kids to watch the cartoon and wanted to talk work stuff, then some of my colleagues who were, home alone, they wanted to socialize for 15 minutes. And I was like, hey, let's get to the chase, But again, I would like to draw attention that it's highly individual, and what fits for one person doesn't probably or fit maybe to another one. And what we are kind of seeing here in Estonia is this kind of going to from one approach being 100% in the office to the other approach of, everybody remotely, to kind of this really hybrid, but not only hybrid in a sense that some are here, some are there, but really also individual approach. So as a company, organization, employee, you really have the opportunity to design the way you work. And here, of course, what really is important, that there still are places for those people who want to socialize more. And what we also here in Estonia see is that those people who live around the capital city, as most of the organizations have the offices in the capital in Estonia, they are in a more privileged situation because they can go to the office when they feel that they need a little bit of socializing with their own colleagues. However, those who live in rural areas are in a much more difficult situation because they really can't go, to the Tallinn, to the office. So I would also encourage organizations to think about it and to create maybe spaces, even just a small space in other cities where their employees can go and discuss ideas and just be around each other.
Yeah, this kind of leads into my next question, and it is for you. I know that Estonia and Tartu have been extremely successful in their remote work system, probably the shining light in Europe, if not the world. But so how is it possible to make an ecosystem in order to attract more talent? You've created. Tell us about the ecosystem that you've created.
Well, I very much agree with what has been said before as well. I think a lot is to do with the culture, the company culture, and not only thinking through how it is running, how it is internally, but also a lot about making it explicit to those people who are not working in your company but might potentially work in your company. Yes. So it's a lot of PR, making yourself visible, making your work practice, your company culture visible to the people who might be working in your organization in the future. And one maybe interesting initiative here in Estonia that our organization is also running is the digital label for organizations that they can apply for, which is called Hybrid Friendly Workplace. So initially every year in May, organizations can fill out the self-evaluation form and get this digital label. And by putting that to their website, to their job announcements, they show to the future employee that we are flexible.
Okay, so that's basically the point. They're trying to attract people. They're basically saying we're remote worker friendly.
Well, it's from one end attracting people, but also to the other hand assuring your own employees and then taking that responsibility. Because if you have this label, then your own employees are also going to look at you and ask, okay, but where are those flexible working arrangements or culture?
Yes, it says here on the tin that
exactly.
Where is that? Where's the evidence of that?
So you're taking responsibility that from here onwards, at least the next 3 years until when the label is valid, we are going to be flexible.
Salvatore, what technical tools or platforms do you rely on for remote collaboration and communication? And what issues do we have? This is a big one. And what issues do we have for cybersecurity?
This is a funny question because during the pandemic period, we become expert of all the tool of e-call meeting.
Yes.
So there is a funny situation where you start the call in the morning with the Google Meet, then we jump to Zoom. At the end, we have 2 WebEx, and we finished with the Teams.
Yes.
So it's crazy time. Every time you need to change your headphone because there are some kind of noise or change. You need to configure everything. But it's an important jump in terms of digital, in terms of digitalization of the country. I know that during the pandemic period, my mother called me crying because she's a teacher in the...
Sorry, she caught you crying?
Crying.
You were crying?
No, my mother.
Your mother was crying?
Yeah, because she's a teacher, and every day they change the platform for for EduTech, so for the remote education. And of course, when the pandemic started, there are a lot of confusing in terms of which is the best tool, especially for the public administration, for institution. So in terms of company, we change and we adapt it. So we test different communication tools and then we select the best one. For the public institution, there is someone that choose for you the tool that you need to use.
This is what you're using, and end of story. Yes. Yes.
And but of course there are also other tools that we use in terms of collaborative tool. Now there is Miro, but we use the platform for writing in collaborative way. We start to use these also before the pandemic period, but after the pandemic period there is our jump in order to put all the documents in the cloud, because it's difficult for us to reach the office. And then with the digital documents, it's possible also by home or by everywhere to find the invoice, to find the contract.
Cybersecurity. You're talking about putting things on the cloud.
Yes.
Let's talk about cybersecurity.
At the moment, the cybersecurity is not a relevant problem, but not because it's not. Because we use Google platform, so this problem is mitigated, is transferred to Google. So in our case of company, we don't have the office of cybersecurity. We use Google product, Google Cloud, and in that case, all the problem of cybersecurity is mitigated and is passed to Google. It's not our stuff. Of course, I believe that a lot during this new period, this cybersecurity problem will be more high, more effective.
Yeah.
And in some public administration, we just start to see the effect of this crisis, of this problem. And a lot of company is just start to work how to build an efficient ecosystem in order to protect their data.
Alex, you were raising your eyebrows a little there when we were talking about cybersecurity and Google, maybe.
Yeah, just a little, because I remember the funny story from years ago. I think it was around 2006 or 7 when corporations would start letting them people work from home at some point in Romania. I had this friend who would go shopping, and she would ask her mother to just go and move the mouse and click. They didn't have like the automatic clickers, clicker butts back then, so it should appear to be working. So I think with remote work, cybersecurity is very important for many considerations, because as you said, we are somehow feeling that if you work with a reputable platform, we are just going to pass the responsibility.
We'll pass the buck on to them, yes.
But Google is a great example of how it's a bit more delicate than that, because with the data protection legislation, for instance, we had a huge issue at some point because Google was becoming to be non-compliant because there was a huge issue with the agreement between the United States and the European Union with data transfer and legislation. So you might work with a huge corporation that claims to be okay, but they might be not, and for reasons that are not up to you. And then in theory, to be compliant, you have to change the platform in its entirety, and it's really complicated, especially in Europe, where data protection is really an important issue. With Zoom, for instance, you had a change in the terms of services, I think, a year or two ago, in which they stopped being compliant with some of the things. It appeared that they could transfer some data or have access to conversation and so on. And with now with generative AI, it's even more complicated because a lot of people are using, for instance, OpenAI, and they don't know that everything you input into ChatGPT somehow goes into the database and it's usable.
Did they not realize at the beginning of that was open?
Yeah,
AI, it's open.
Open, yeah, it's open. So if you use, for instance, I mean, if you look at policies for using generative AI in universities in Europe or in the UK, for instance, you would see that they don't encourage students to use, if they use generative AI, they don't encourage it to upload their papers in it to be checked or graded, because there's a huge property rights issue there.
Yes.
And if you use it at work, for instance, you might get sensitive data leaked and not know about it, just because you appear to. I mean, you think that you're being really high tech,
but you're not.
But you're not. Yes, because the platforms are more complicated than it seems. And if you just use whatever is available, it's. We might run into big issues. And you also have the consumer technology that poses huge different risks. We've had, for instance, with Strava, it was the people would use to just go on runs or traveling with their bikes, which made public at some point a few years ago their maps. I don't know if you know that case.
No.
The very heat maps of people using Strava. And what this did is it disclosed the location of some American bases in in places they weren't supposed to have them, because you'd see trajectories in the desert where people would go for runs, use Strava for the runs, and you'd have nothing built there. So if you look on Google Maps, right, okay, what this is? Oh, this might be.
What's he running around
base.
in the desert for no reason? Yes,
exactly.
3 o'clock in the morning.
So you have a lot of cybersecurity risks that don't just come from the infrastructure you're using in the company, but also from what people are doing on the side. So I think we might need a bit more cybersecurity, let's say, skills for regular people in order to avoid this random sharing of data everywhere, because digital footprint is really easy to access from any point. You just buy, a light bulb, and someone can use it to hack into your home, and it's not very difficult to do.
Yes, forget oil. Data is the new money maker. Estonia, how have you solved the problem of cybersecurity? You have so many people, especially for the government, for local governments working from home. You have lots of sensitive information there.
Yeah, I would like to say that all is good and we're all safe here in Estonia, but the truth is that also here many organizations are actually puzzled with this topic. And I'm not saying that they don't have the proper things at place, but still, because things are changing really fast, especially now with the war in Ukraine, there are a lot of attacks to the databases and to the infrastructures here in Estonia. Yes, just a couple of weeks ago, one of Estonian pharmacy chain was also hit, and their customer data was leaked. So yeah, it's a big threat, and really. If people think about their future careers, where they would like to work in IT, then the new, let's say, cybersecurity specialists are getting better paid even today than programmers in Estonia, because it's just really a rare skill and really in demand on the job market and in organizations.
Sorry, I want to ask one thing specifically. We're in Tartu, as we said before, and we've just been speaking to the deputy mayor of Tartu, and he was explaining that a vast majority of the workers in the local government, the city government, actually work remotely. How is this secure? How do you keep these? They're not all in one place. They're all working remotely. How is it? Because this is very sensitive information.
I believe that they have certain work practices and infrastructures at place. Probably they're using VPN connections, which are secured and so forth. So a lot of that, also as said before, relies on how organization builds their infrastructure and their cybersecurity. But the second part, which is as important as the first part, is really how the people then use those infrastructures and how they work.
Exactly.
And even before pandemic, when I was interviewing organizations, they were saying that they're training their employees how and where and how to work. For example, if you work in an airport with your laptop open. Everybody can see your screen. Everybody can see.
Or on a bus for an hour while you're going to work.
Exactly. And if you're kind of working with really highly sensitive documents, then probably you need some screens cover that people cannot see, if they're looking from a different angle. Also, if you're in public places, the networks are not that secured, but luckily also there are certain applications now, et cetera, that you can use. But it really draws back to employees also being trained and competent in such topics.
Interesting.
It's depend of the powerful of the data that you managed.
True.
So if it's a sensitive data, of course it's important. But if I'm writing a project, probably is not so important like data, and I can work.
But then again, probably those who were running in the desert also thought that their running data is not that important. So it's tricky sometimes. You might think that I'm not that important. Who cares where I'm running and what I'm doing? But it can create these data points that somebody can use. So I think that it involves also a lot of critical thinking from individuals, and this is also one of the competencies that is in high demand in the future. In general, this higher level cognitive critical thinking, because things are changing really fast. There are a lot of risks, a lot of threats around you, a lot of also misinformation. Even if you use generative AI, you cannot believe everything that it says. You need to check. So you have to really have a high level of critical thinking skills.
Indeed. You're my co-working space guy. So this is probably more of a question like the analog world meets the digital world. So how do you see the future of traditional office spaces in the light in the rise of remote working space? I mean, how is this affecting real estate prices? This whole, especially with the co-working space.
We see two different logic in the co-working space. The first one is the sharing community effect. So it's possible to share a desk, it's possible to share the office. And this is the first logic. The second one is the importance of to leave the space and just not to visit the space. And the idea is, I make you an example. If you are a tourist in a city and you can visit the city with your guide, it's a digital guide. You can read the information, the documentation, and you can discover the city. But you can also visit the city with the local guide. The information that the people can give you is very more than all the information that you can read. So the importance of this co-working space is not about the space itself, but is about the community and people that can live there.
Yes.
In terms of real estate, what we can say is that with the co-working space is not a big business. Okay, it's just utilities. It's depend on how many office, how many desks you have, but you don't become rich with the co-working space. We have 2-1, so this is a good consideration. But the powerful of a co-working space is the community and the opportunities that you can create with people that stay and live and work together.
So it's like an offshoot of the co-working spaces, the other opportunities, potential opportunities that might come up.
One thing that happen in our co-working space is that the culture district to create a call for proposal, and we work all together with our co-worker in order to make a project proposal. And we won the project proposal, just combining different expertise, different skills, different people, just working together. So we operate like extended enterprise. And the powerful that you can see is that in this extended enterprise, but all the people live together, there is a good stuff, there is a new team, and also you can face big opportunities together.
Interesting. I have one more question because we're rapidly running out of time. I have one more question for all of you. Of course, we're going to go ladies first. So how do you think remote work will continue to evolve in the future, and what future trends do you anticipate?
Well, I'm a believer that we are going to continue working remotely in a hybrid way. The way how people work will be more individualized, so based on the actual needs of the employee. And we also need to, our organizations are forced to apply this, not only because of the demands coming from the job market today, but if you just look at the trends, the pace of aging, then I think that remote work can be one of the ways how you can retain your people. So instead of letting them go fully to go and retire and enjoy their holidays, you can provide them an opportunity to stay working at least part-time. And I think it's very important, but that again needs competencies. And we need to start developing those competencies from the leadership competencies, but also from the team member side, how to work in such teams today.
Alex?
I think I'm going to go back to the topic of legislation again, because I think we need better frameworks in order to allow remote work to happen as it should. Again, to go back to Romania, I have a case in which we had a lot of debate over the last years over part-time work, for instance, and now I think again, after many consideration and going back and forth, part-time work is the minimum level of taxation for part-time work is the minimum wage for full-time work. So in order to address, for instance, populations getting older and so on, we need more flexible ways of working enabled by legislation. We try to create a better balance between the, let's say, state being afraid of people trying to defraud the system, enabling them to get social security, but also enabling our organization have better and diverse workforces. And I remember I saw this morning a research by a Romanian research company, Frappe Digital, that was done exactly on remote work, and it asked a very interesting question. They tried to see if people were in favor or not of remote working, and people who went remote don't really want to go back. And what's interesting is that they also ask, what about if we increase your wages by 10%? And again, for people already being remote, even a 30% increase in wages would not
send them back to the office.
No.
Really?
Yes. This doesn't mean that remote work is so good. It probably also means that people who are working remotely are people in a better position as a social class, because they have enough wages. If you're again on minimum wage or around the minimum wage, 30% is quite a lot, and I think it might make a huge difference. But the future hopefully might bring better wages for everyone, which would also increase the number of remote workers, because if you're more comfortable at work, you can work from anywhere, and people who are usually dissatisfied with their work are also the ones not getting from their workplace everything they need. So we need better organizations, better work conditions, and obviously better wages in order to have a workforce that's more flexible, that can also work unsupervised.
I agree. Before we jump to Salvatore, Sirja had something to add?
I wanted to say that we have been talking a lot about remote work, so really like being in a different physical space. And I think that many people might think, okay, but I work in a factory or I work in a front line and I cannot ever be part of that. Here in Estonia, we have very good practices in some organizations that instead of giving those people an opportunity to work from home, they give them more flexibility in terms of time. So I also kind of invite organizations and leaders to think about flexibility in general, not just, where the work happens, but also when. And you can create more equality in the organization if you, for example, office workers can work from home from time to time, but then those who cannot, you can give them maybe some free day every month, one to compensate that they cannot take part of that flexibility.
Or sliding working hours.
Exactly, sliding working hours, giving them more say in developing, their schedules for work and so forth. So I kind of also invite to think about the future, not only in terms of remote work as a physical opportunity to work from different places, but also really as a flexible way, in general.
Good point. So how are we evolving?
My point of view is about market opportunity.
Market opportunities?
Yes, of course. The remote worker is a new type of customer, and is a new kind of customer that need have a new problem. The problem of be alone. We know a startup that create a kind of platform with a virtual room where you can meet your colleague, and you can work in a virtual room from home, but you can reach your colleagues. Another things that we see is also that a lot of companies start to buy services for the employee, also in terms of access to co-working space, but also in terms of experiences for the employee, like sport attraction, yoga, but also cultural event. The company buy the access for the museum, for the concert, in order to improve the quality of the life in their work office.
And to motivate the workers.
Yes, to motivate it.
Yes, good idea.
So the world is changing so fast. And of course, we're talking about also artificial intelligence, you know. Of course, we need to change the leadership attitude of people. And also you need to understand how to motivate people and how to don't work with people that need to have a list of job to do, but they are a little manager in order to organize their own work and organize your time.
Good point.
This is the most important things or the most important challenge that we need to face immediately. After that, there are a lot of technology now, and I'm quite comfortable that we can find the new solution that solve any kind of problem.
That's a very nice place to end, a very good conclusion for today. So thank you for tuning in to our Changing Workplaces, what do we need for remote working. Today we embarked on a thought-provoking journey exploring the multifaceted landscape of remote work with our insightful panelists. Thank you again for your time, very enjoyable. We hope today's dialogue has provided valuable insights, inspiration and practical takeaways for our listeners as they navigate their own remote work journeys. Remember, the future of work is not predetermined. It's shaped by our collective actions and aspirations. Let's continue to embrace the possibilities of remote work while cultivating a culture of connection, creativity and collaboration in the ever-changing landscape of our workplaces. Thank you for joining us again. Thank you for your time. Thank you to my panelists. And until next time, stay curious and keep evolving.